most powerful part of the MRS concept and the most challenging is groups management. So what I want to do is to just take a few minutes and not get into the details of how some of these processes and procedures work, but basically give kind of an overview of what the concept is and how we see it operating for your group, your organization, your club. So basically, we need to define what a group is. A group is really nothing more than a collection of members. And as far as MRS is concerned, that's a collection of subscriptions. Now, with that, it does not necessarily mean that you're subscribing to each group. It just simply means that you're subscribed into the MRS system and that you have access to groups. So that's definition number one. Definition number two is, what is a member? A member is a person who has a subscription with MRS and has been delivered a radio, and that radio has been programmed for that operator. So that's a member. And that programming also includes assignment into one or more groups. So that kind of lays the foundation there. The challenge comes into play, excuse me, as far as group management and what that looks like. So what I want to do is kind of back up, give kind of a 30,000 foot overview of, one, how you roll a group out to begin with. What does it look like? How does that take place? Basically, what you want to do is you want to have in place a number of participants or potential participants that are going to be in your group. Now, this may already be an established group, such as a Skywarn group or Aries or a club, something like that, that you already have people that are participating. But it also includes those future participants as well, because you have to kind of think that out and how that's going to work. But basically, let's just say that you have a Skywarn group. We'll just work with Skywarn. That group, let's say, has 10 current participants, and they're all participating at different levels. What's going to take place is, one, I'm going to work with that group, and we're going to identify a group manager, and we're going to identify an assistant group manager. So we've got the authorization that's provided to add people into the group and to remove people from the group. So the manager and the assistant manager have that authority, and we have them on record as subscribers at MRS. Now, again, not getting into the details of how that takes place, but basically it is a written authorization. And when I say written, I don't mean a letter in the snail mail. I just mean that we have a document on file, such as an email, which is the preferred method, that states, we're going to add John Doe into our group. I'm giving you authorization to do that. And here's the basic information that you need to get that done. All right. So once the group is identified, this group of people and participants, and then a manager and assistant manager is identified, then we construct that group. We add all the members in, and you can have up to 200 members per group. Now, this is where it gets a little complicated to explain, and I'm going to provide detailed video explanations at a later time, so you can get to that, and we'll draw it out. We'll make sure that it's real clear on how this actually takes place. But I want to just kind of create a mental picture for you, if at all possible, and describe how this rolls out, how this might look in a couple different scenarios. One, just a typical non-emergency scenario, and then an emergency scenario, and kind of get your gears running in your brain so you can kind of picture it and work it out. So basically, we'll start with the non-emergency group construction of a network. A network, by definition, is a collection of groups that are participating, that a member's participating within. So you may have a member that has a radio, and that radio is programmed for that member to participate in a number of different groups. Now these are what we're going to call non-monitored groups, and I'll explain what that means when we get into the emergency scenario. But basically, think of a group that's on a radio, identified on the radio, as similar to being a channel on a CB or a frequency on an amateur radio. It's a place where people congregate to communicate. Hope that makes sense. So basically, you could have multiple channels assigned to a member on that member's radio, and those groups, when selected, you have the ability to communicate with those particular groups of people. So by changing that group or channel, if you want to think of it that way, you're isolating who you're communicating with. And it's a group of members. Now, within that group, you can communicate privately with the individuals in that group. So you can select, once you have the group selected, you can then select on the radio the member that you want to participate in a private discussion with. Now, a little bit of technical on this, but what's happening in the background is when you select the group, it isolates the members. And then you have the ability to select a member. And when you do that, you're creating kind of a small group. It's really just a two-person group. It's you and the person that you're wanting to connect with. And it forces, if you will, the selection of that person so you can communicate with them. So it forces on their radio the connection to your radio, and then you can talk. Now, once either of you change that selection, whether it be to another person or a group, then it breaks that individual connection that you had established, and it puts you back into that new selection, whether it be another person that you're wanting to talk with privately or back into a group that you've selected. And that can take place on either side. So either of you can jump out at any point out of that one-to-one communication and go back to wherever you want to communicate with. All right. So to recap, what you're doing is you have groups that are assigned to a member that have, or if you want to think of it as the member assigned to groups, either way, that's fine. But on the radio, you have these groups that are assigned to the radio, and the operator, the member, can select which group he or she wants to communicate with on the radio and communicate with that group of people. But at the same time, if you want to select an individual, another member out of that selected group that you want to communicate with privately or one-on-one, you can do that as well. And then at any time, you can break that connection, go back to where you want to communicate, whether it be a group or another individual. Now, with the group communication, you are not broadcasting, if you will, on all the other groups that you have assigned on the radio. You're only communicating within the group that you've selected. So I hope that makes sense. Now, that's really easy, straightforward as far as non-emergency communication. But where we're trying to strive for is a standardized, structured communication network for emergency communication that flows easily. It's really a hands-off. We've structured it as requested, and it takes the stress and the burden off the members to really select anything other than you just change that channel or that group assignment and you're off and communicating. So let's take the basis that we've created with this non-emergency group, and let's move it over to the scenario of an emergency group. The complications comes into procedure and protocol with anything, and that's especially if you're an amateur radio operator and you're participating in emergency communication, you understand that. And I want to paint a picture for those who are not aware of what takes place in an emergency communication center. and I just want to kind of, now this is a basic picture. It's not every situation, but it'll give you an idea of what may be going on. Is basically in the communication center, you may have, depending on the situation and depending on the number of people involved, you have multiple communication stations that are set up, and at those stations you have radio operators. Now, each station could be set up in a different way. You could have, in a smaller community, you could have one operator that is operating multiple types of radios at one station. So he may be on a 2-meter radio that's sitting there as a handheld. He may have a base station 2-meter radio that's there. He may even have two 2-meter base stations, depending on who, if he's talking with two different groups of people. And he may have an HF rig. He may have two HF rigs that are on two different bands. And basically what's going on is the information that is coming in over one radio, think group of people, the communications coming in on one is taken down and then delivered over another medium, another radio. So the situation may be that you get a communication in let's say a hurricane. So a hurricane area is set up, and you may be taking in communication over your 2-meter local communication on that 2-meter rig. You're taking down the information, and then you're going to relay it to a hurricane communication center, possibly, or a state level emergency communication center over HF, which is a long haul. That's at a distance. So then you're going to respond. The response is going to be, you get a response on the HF radio, you're taking that down, and then maybe you're responding back on the 2-meter radio. So you're working with two different groups of people, or two channels of information, if you want to think of it that way. And that combination of information exchange could be taking place over any two or more radios. So in a smaller community situation, and you got that one operator on multiple radios, it can get really, really confusing. The other break apart from that, or other way that it might be managed, is you may have dedicated operators to particular radio frequencies or bands. So you may have one station with an operator that is working 2-meter only, but he may have multiple 2-meter local portable radios. So he's talking locally to multiple groups of people. He's taking in that information or sending out that information. We'll say he's taking in that information, he's writing it down, and then that paperwork is physically handed over. In this situation, it's physically handed over to another operator who's supposed to send that information out over another radio, which may be the HF, or it may be another 2-meter, whatever the case might be. But you have multiple operators operating on different radios or different frequencies or with different groups of people, and the information is physically going back and forth between those operators to put the information out or pull the information in, hand it off, and it goes down another one. So if you follow with that type of imagery, hopefully you were able to follow me on that, that's really what's taking place on your MRS radio, is you have the ability to change channels, if you will, change those groups of people that you're talking with, and send the information to and from those different groups of people. So one of the challenges that immediately comes up is, well, when you're in one group of people, you cannot communicate with another group of people, nor can you hear them if you're in a non-emergency situation. Solution is, now we have the ability to assign you a monitor group or multiple groups. What this means is that you have a primary group that you have selected on your equipment that you're communicating with most of the time. You're actually talking over that group. But there are other groups that you may need to monitor for traffic. So let me paint the picture with this. Let's say that you're in an emergency communication center as an amateur radio operator, and you're communicating. Your primary group is the local field responders, and there's another group or channel on your radio for the emergency commander, and it's a group that we've established for this incident, let's say. And this group maybe Aries, maybe something else, maybe National Weather Service, talking about Skywarn, so they may have a radio. And whenever you change your group, you don't want to lose the ability to hear what's going on at the National Weather Service with Skywarn Command, if you will, okay? So as you change channels and you're communicating amongst those groups of people, and I know I'm using the word channel and group interchangeably, but hopefully you'll follow there. You're never losing reception of your monitored group, which in this case would be National Weather Service Office Skywarn. Now at any time, because you're a part of that group as well, if you need to communicate with the Skywarn at National Weather Service, then all you have to do is change the group on your radio to that group, identified group. Let's say it's identified as Skywarn, and you can communicate with them, and then you can change back to your primary group, which again might be those responders that are in the field. But going back and forth, again, you're always monitoring that Skywarn group. I hope that makes sense. All right. So all of this is controlled by me and my team at MRS. And what this allows us to do is that we can also do what's called stand-up groups. So a stand-up group would be a situation has taken place, a disaster has occurred that outside of the currently established groups of people, whether it be Aries or Skywarn or a club, ham club, whatever the case might be, or a CERTS, community emergency team. Regardless of what's currently set up, we have the ability on the fly and over the air to create a stand-up group. And let's just call it emergency command. So we're going to create an emergency command group that has been requested of us by, let's say, the county emergency control. Well, I don't know who might have requested it. Could it come from a club or whatever, but it has to be fairly high up to request that stand-up group because someone has to be in charge. So when that group is established, we have to establish a manager of that group and an assistant manager of that group, who they have the authorization to add individuals into that stand-up group. Now those individuals on their radio, what they would see is that at some point when they're added into that stand-up group, that group appears on their radio, and hopefully they're notified one way or another on that they're going to be added or they have been added, and it becomes available whenever they're added right immediately on their radio. Now, I say immediately, they may have to maybe restart the radio, depends on the situation, but normally those groups come right up. So when we have that stand-up group, then again, the manager and assistant manager are managing that group and adding people in, and they're going to contact us through written communication, primarily email, that request this member who's registered with us with an email address needs to be added into the group, and they're going to give us the radio identifier number. Details on that later, okay? But basically, they're identifying the member and the radio, and they're requesting that that member be added into the stand-up group. And it does not take that member away from any of the other established groups that they've been associated with. So that stand-up group is added, and now it's also monitored. We select that stand-up group as a monitored group as well, because there may be other stand-up groups that have to be created. And if you're changing groups on your radio, you don't want to lose communication with the command center, with emergency command. You want to be able to hear them regardless of the group that you're currently talking with. Okay? Now, when I say that there may be other stand-up groups created, depending on the severity or the totality of the situation, could be geographic, the size of the geographic impact, or the number of people that are participating. You may stand up another group called the ingress group. So basically what that means is you've got, normally if it's a large and especially publicized disaster or emergency, then you have volunteers that are coming into the area that want to participate, and they need instructions on where they can stay, what route they need to take that's safe to come in, who are they supposed to check in with when they get there, and where can they eat. All of these things that are bringing, as people come into the emergency zone, if you will, they need this information while not disrupting the actual communication of the command center. So what you can do in that situation is you, again, this stand-up group for ingress has a manager and an assistant manager, and they're authorizing people as they're coming into the area to be a part of this ingress group. Now, it just hit me, and I need to clarify something. As I'm going through all these scenarios, we have to assume that they're using an MRS radio. You can't use any other device and this work. You have to be part of our network in order for it to work, because that's the only way we can manage group participation. We do not manage information flow. We do not manage the regulations and the priorities and the protocols once the groups are established. But what we do manage is the group structures, the network and the connections between the groups. So just had to throw that out there so we're all clear on this. But basically what's going on is in this scenario, the manager of the ingress group has added John Doe, who is a subscribed member with MRS, into the ingress group. He's getting communication back and forth to that, or from that group, on how to get into the area safely, etc. Now, the methodology there, which is not handled by us, it's only suggested, but it's going to be controlled by emergency services one way or another on how you handle things. Maybe FEMA protocol or whatever, but regardless, I don't have anything to do with that. All I'm doing is establishing the communication connection amongst the members, okay? But basically what we would suggest as far as how the MRS system works is, once that person has come into the area and checked in, then the emergency communication group manager will request that that individual be added to the emergency communications group and removed from the ingress group, because you don't want confusion. You don't want somebody that's already on site trying to communicate with the ingress group. That's not their, they've switched over. They've already come in. Now they're part of the emergency communication group. That's the one that they need to be communicating with. And when we do that, and when we make that transition as requested, then that emergency communication group becomes a monitored group. Now, if you recall, what I said earlier is that a monitored group allows you to hear what's going on without you necessarily have selected that group. So if you've got someone that has a group assignment on their radio, they're coming in from out of state, they've got groups that communicate with their home groups, their home clubs. You know, maybe they got to check in. Maybe they've got a family group. We can do that too. But you don't want to take them away from that. You still have to have them monitor what's going on here in the emergency arena. But they can change back to their home group and communicate with them just like they were back home, and then switch while monitoring the emergency group. And then they can switch back to the emergency group if and when they need to communicate. Now, let's take it another step, okay? And I know this is lengthy, but I hope you're hanging on here, okay? That emergency communication group may request that we have multiple stand-up groups for functionality in the emergency arena, okay? So you may have potential groups that have been established that you as a volunteer operator are coming into, and you're going to be assigned to. Let's say one group is traffic control, one group is public relations, one group is utility and services, one group is, and then on and on and on, okay? So we have, at MRS, we have the ability to create these sub-groups, if you will, these other stand-up groups that the volunteer coming in can be assigned to as well. Now, what we would do in an emergency situation is that as you come through the ingress group, and then you check in, and then they assign you to the emergency group, command group, and then they assign you also to that subgroup for public relations. Let's just say that, for example. It could be anything. Then we're going to create monitoring for you on all of the groups that you've been assigned. So if you catch that, what's happening is now you're able to monitor multiple emergency groups. Now, the protocol for that, for communication, is going to differ depending on the situation and who's in control of it. But basically, the call-out's going to be, let's just say AA5HY from WB5VDG on public relations group. That would be kind of the call-out. That's decided amongst what's going on. That we don't decide that, okay? But basically, that's the idea. Is you're calling for someone, you're identifying who you are, and you're identifying the group that you're transmitting on. So when the person that's monitoring picks that radio up, and they know that call out was from the public relations group, he can select, or she can select the public relations group to transmit on, respond, and then at their discretion change back to whatever group that they need to be on. So I hope you followed that. And it's going. I can't even recap it because there's so much involved in there. But basically, what we're trying to do, and if you remember back, we'll circle back around too. Okay, if you remember back originally, what I said was you have the additional capability of communicating privately to members within the group that you have selected. So if you're in the command group for whatever reason, and you have and you're in that group, that means you have the ability to communicate privately with the whoever's in charge, any of those group members, and how they're identified. So you've got that capability. And then also in the subgroups that you may be assigned as well, you can communicate privately within those groups. All right, wrapping up, there's one more step to keep in mind, and it's on the flip side. You ingress in, you've come through that group, you've checked in, and your assignment is only to a subgroup. If your assignment is only to a subgroup and not the emergency command group, then you're going to be communicating and reporting to the manager, the assistant manager of that group, and then whoever that they've assigned to be the representative member who is going to be communicating to the command management group. So let me state that again. when you're in a subgroup, you've ingressed in, they've taken you out of the ingress group, they've put you into a subgroup, public relations. But they did not add you to the command group. So you can talk with anyone in the public relations group, but we have not set you up to monitor command group because they haven't requested you to be a member of the command group. But the people in charge of your subgroup, public relations, which is either the manager, the assistant manager, or someone that they've designated as the liaison, if you will, to the command group, that's who you're going to be communicating with. So you're local, you're talking to your representative in your group, you're relaying information. That person, whoever is the delegated liaison, if you will, to the command group, would be the one responsible for relaying the information. I hope you follow. It can be very, very confusing if you're on the back end of this, trying to get it scheduled, set up and scheduled in such a way to work in a structured manner. It can be very confusing, but the beauty behind it is the simplicity. At the end user level, at the radio operator level, the only thing that the operator or the emergency volunteer has to be concerned with is that his radio works. He's used the information and instructions given to ingress in. He's been assigned behind the scenes. He's being informed you're going to be assigned on your radio to the public relations group or to the command group. Here's your role, here's your duties, here's your responsibilities. Everything that's happening behind the scenes, that person's oblivious to. They have no idea what's going on, what I just described. All they know is on their radio, those groups pop up and they have the ability to work within those groups. And they may be informed, also instructed about monitoring. John, I just want to let you know that you've been assigned the public relations group, but we've also given you the responsibility of being in the command group. We're going to have you monitoring both of those. So just be aware of, you have to make sure that what you're listening for is whatever communications coming out of the respective group. I don't handle that. Those procedures and protocols are set up by the emergency response teams and emergency command center. Okay. All I do is, at their request, I'm setting up groups of volunteers, operators, to communicate amongst each other. Okay. Whew. Man, that was a mouthful. And I know this has been 30 minutes of explanation. And I hope it was entertaining. But I tell you what, it really can be confusing on the back end if you don't have a really strong grasp of what this concept is, which I do. That's why I'm explaining it to you. But the beauty, like I said, behind it is you don't have to worry about all of the details of how that is taking place. All you have to be concerned with is, how do I get connected with a group? And if you're a manager or assistant manager, where do I send the email to add John Doe into the group? That's really all you have to be concerned with. As you go up the tiers, and if you're at the emergency communication level, then those individuals have a little bit more responsibility and duty in the management, but they're doing that anyway. Please understand that. They are already establishing groups of individuals that are responsible for different duties within the response as a whole. They're already setting up these groups of people. We're just adding radio communication to it that allows everyone to communicate at the same level. Okay? Take a breath. Dry mouth now. Okay, so know that's a lot of information, and that's a very high level kind of understanding. But the good thing about it is, if you need to, rewind it, listen to it again, All of this is going to be put on paperwork if you're ever participating. So if you're in charge of a stand-up group, emergency response, or anything like that, we're going to be working with those emergency control teams and consulting them and working with them on how to set those groups up. You're probably never going to have to worry about 90% of what I just explained. I just want to kind of give you an understanding of what the magnitude of what we're putting together might be, and that this is not just a set of walkie-talkies in the woods, okay? This is a very coordinated effort to make this happen, and it's not just us. We're just contributing one puzzle piece to a solution, and we're asking for feedback from you and from others on how to make that solution better and function more efficiently and quickly. So whatever fits the bill with the groups that you're participating with currently, whether that be a radio club, a CERT team, Skywarn with National Weather Service, ARES, whatever the case might be, we're here to help you. That's what it's going to be. We're here to help you. And if you didn't catch anything that I said, which was a lot, then just be confident that we're here to assist you. I will be here to answer your questions, consult you on what I think needs to happen, and then show you how to drive this solution to make it work for you and your team, okay? So, as we proceed with this, a lot more information will be put up on the website. We're putting together Facebook groups. We're putting together communication threads and such. We'll have a membership site up at some point in the near future. It's all for you. Just let us know what we need to do for you, okay? Website again is www.wb5vdg, that's Whiskey Bravo 5 Victor Delta Golf.com. My name's Mark, 73.